Welcome. Greetings to our candidates forum for public advocate. My name is Monique Jackson Dickens, and I am the proud president of the New York Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. We are so proud to bring you this event in collaboration with the League of Women Voters and the Xi Phi chapter of Omega Psi Phi Incorporated. It is so important that you hear from our candidates because an educated voter is definitely the best voter. The New York Alumni chapter prides itself in bringing you community service, and our service area spans from the borough on the borough of Manhattan from 155th Street South River to River. One of our many focuses is in political awareness and involvement. And so now I would like to turn the stage over to one of our collaborators and co sponsors, Brother Harry Watson from the Xi Phi chapter of Omega Psi Phi.
Greetings, esteemed colleagues and honored guests. My name is Harry M. Watson II, and I'm the bossalist of the Xi Phi chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Xi Phi chapter has been in the Harlem since November 11th, 1926. We are proud to be a part of this program tonight that we have partnered with the New York Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the League of Women Voters. We have come together to bring this program to you, our New York City community. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderators.
Crystal, please.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, Monique. Thank you for having us here from the League. We bring you greetings. We're excited to watch this forum tonight with the candidates. Please continue to stay in touch with the League of Women Voters. We're holding ranked choice voting trainings throughout the election season, and we're just excited to partner with you all. Enjoy the program tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. My name is Kimberly Hayes. I am the co-chair of the Social Action Committee of the New York Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta, and we are bringing you this event this evening. I am going to now introduce our moderators for this evening. We have Donnell Grant Bolden, who is a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, the Xi Phi chapter, who's one of our co-sponsors this evening, and he is a supervisor for the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Next, we have Nida Khan, an independent journalist, producer, and multimedia professional who has worked in print, radio, and TV. She's an on-air contributor to the news political show Open Line Online on 107.5 WBLS New York. She previously worked as a producer on the nationally syndicated radio show Keeping It Real with Reverend Al Sharpton. As a news correspondent for WRKS 98.7 Kiss FM in New York, she covered everything from Barack Obama's presidential campaign in 2008 to protests calling for police reform. I will now turn it over to our co-moderators, Nida and Donnell.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good evening, everybody. I'm Nida Khan, as Kim just said, and I will be one of the moderators for this important discussion tonight. So welcome to all of the candidates and of course to all of you tuning in online as well for this important virtual forum that we're having. As you may or may not know, New York City Public Advocate is actually first in line were anything to happen to the mayor. So the importance of this seat cannot be overstated. So tonight we're very lucky and excited to have three of the candidates on the ballot joining us. We have author and community advocate Anthony Tony Herbert and computer engineer failed Bitcoin entrepreneur, privacy activist, and a French socialist, Theo Chino. And we will also be joined by the current public advocate who's seeking re-election, Jumaane Williams. So welcome to all of you. I'm going to turn it over to the candidates to give a brief introduction of themselves. Please keep in mind that it will be limited to 2 minutes to each candidate, and somebody will be keeping track of the clock, so please try not to go over. And as Kimberly has also reiterated, throughout the course of this event, that this is a discussion. It's not going to be a debate. This is an opportunity for the public to better understand the candidates, to make an informed decision when it comes down to the election. So with that, I will turn it over to the candidates for the introduction. Theo, if you can please begin, that would be great.
Well, hi, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and honor. So yes, my name is Theo Chino. I'm an Afro-Dominican French citizen, and I am a candidate for public advocate. The reason I'm running is because I am frustrated with the current political system. The way I got introduced into politics was simply to go complain to my elected official who told me, hey, if you're not happy with my job, run. And I decided to run, and I discovered that the Board of Election was weaponized. Basically, I was set up to fail from the beginning. And over the course, I discovered that I was a victim of housing corruption. And suddenly I started getting into it and learning about the process and running. And now I made it on the ballot after 10 years of effort of trying to get it on the ballot. I made it on the ballot thanks to a tool I built called Rep My Block. And we'll talk about that later because I believe that will be an empowerment tool for any person to get on the ballot. With that tool, we managed to get an 18-year-old on the controller ticket, Alex Penn. Paperboy Prince is running for mayor. He used the tool. And basically, we are using that as the biggest civic course for the population in New York. So we'll talk about that later, but this is why I'm in 2 minutes.
Okay,
I'm complicated, of course.
Okay, thank you so much. And Tony, we'll turn it over to you for a brief introduction as well.
Thank you for this opportunity. I am Anthony Tony Herbert. I'm a community advocate, former staffer to Congressman Ed Towns, worked in the City Council for Councilmember Priscilla Wooten, may she rest in peace, and also for the New York State Senate. Have always worked either in the front office, working with folks individually, helping to resolve their cases, and or have worked within government to understand the process of being able to introduce legislation, as well as to understand the ULURP and the landmark process. I'm fortunate to have been born and raised here in Brooklyn, US of A, where I still reside in the East Flatbush-Canarsie corridor. And I'm fortunate to be a father of 4 awesome young people who are making me proud every single day, and recently celebrating my 1-year wedding anniversary of marriage. I'm happy about that. And excited about the fact that we're in some times where a voice needs to be heard. We are losing out to the pandemic, which has actually devastated us, in addition to the high rate of crime that's taken place. And unfortunately, there is no volume coming from our elected officials, except for when they want to play politics. And as Theo has said, there's some serious concern with regards to the rhetoric coming from the elected body that does not actually ascertain the resources that we as taxpayers, the middle class who is being left out, those individuals who are here in this city are saying, enough is enough. So I'm here to run, and I'm running for public advocate for the purpose of changing that dynamic and being the actual voice for the people.
Okay, great. We're going to get into the Q&A portion, and I'll throw it over to my co-moderator, Donnell, to begin that.
Good evening, candidates and guests. The first question for tonight, as the public advocate, how would you approach oversight of the NYPD? Mr. Herbert, would you begin, please?
Yes, thank you for that question. I am actually currently, as of today, I was just endorsed by all of the major law enforcement unions here in the city because they recognize that I'm a fair-minded person for the most part who looks at the details before making any judgments of going out there and holding rallies to demonize those who wear the uniform. i.e., I should mention that a number of those people, quite frankly, come from our city. They live within our neighborhoods and should be treated as such, respectfully as residents, taxpayers, and as voters. But we need to understand that there is a dynamic of a culture that predates a lot of us, where there were some issues working with the police department because of the racism, the cynicism that was amongst this particular group of folks who ran this particular agency. I actually look forward to the opportunity of being able to sit at the table and having the conversations and bringing the voices of our community to these individuals who are now in charge. I celebrate the fact that we now have a lot of minorities in charge, i.e. the likes of Chief Juanita Holmes, Chief Rodney Harrison, Chief Jeff Mandry. These are the folks that are in key positions that can help us to change this dynamic. And I look forward to being able to work with them to make sure that we're getting our voices heard, we're getting the respect that we deserve, and the courtesy and professionalism that they've sworn to is being executed in our streets, opposed to the negativity and the racism that existed prior to.
Thank you. We now have our third panelist on, so we'll invite candidate Williams to give his introduction.
I think he might have dropped off.
I think we may have lost him.
Yes, we have to wait.
Okay.
Sorry, Donnell, so I guess we can redirect that question.
Yes. So, candidate Chino, the first question, as public advocate, how would you approach oversight of the NYPD?
So for me, the oversight of the NYPD, I will approach it very simply. First of all, Pat Lynch need to go. That's simple. We'll start by the union because the representation of the NYPD is through their union. So Pat Lynch is a voice of the NYPD that is negative, that is infuriating, that is a racist, that is, I don't even have enough explicit to describe Pat Lynch. He needs to go. The second thing is we need the public advocate to organize a real union election within the NYPD rank and file. Because every time I go to a cop and I ask him, why the hell did you vote for Pat Lynch? And he looks at me and goes, the system is rigged. Why bother? And that's how we end up with a union that doesn't represent the rank and file of the people who we need, who work with the community. So we have to start by the union. We need a union board that looks like the rank and file of the NYPD, who actually does, where the rank and file does look like us, the community. The second part we need to do as public advocate in the first 3 years, that's what I will work on, figuring out how to get a representation for the NYPD union that looks like them. And from then, we can go to the next step. We need to defund the NYPD by moving money away. For example, not having the 911 call where they respond to mental health issue. Simple things like that. My wife always was flabbergasted every time she had a patient, because she's a psychiatrist. She would call 911 on a suicidal patient, and suddenly in the middle of the clinic, you had 6 cops showing up and monopolizing the place, scaring every patient, just to get EMS to take the patient to the emergency room. We need to stop that, and that's what I will work on.
Okay, thank you, Theo. And to add to what Theo was just saying, Tony Herbert, you mentioned that you were endorsed by the police unions, you've been working with them. So how do you, in this role, if you were to become public advocate, how would you balance that aspect of it with also holding NYPD accountable? You know, there's like great movements for police reform, for change, and calls for de-escalation and things like that. So how would you, in the capacity as public advocate, balance those two things?
Well, I mean, it's common sense. At the end of the day, you know, there's right and then there's wrong. Respectfully, when you have individuals who are paid by the taxpayers, they have to do the bidding of the taxpayers, correct? So it would be my intention to hold them accountable to that which we bring forward. As I had stated, I would be the voice of bringing that information to the community as to what's going on and making sure that the individuals who run these particular unions, and let me just correct Mr. Chino real quick. We can't get rid of Pat Lynch. That's not our job. That's the job of the union membership, to make a determination on who they want to represent them. What we can do is exasperate a conversation that says clearly that there's some serious concerns from our community and things need to be addressed. But the adversarial conversations and not being respectful and being able to sit across the table doesn't get us anywhere. So the best thing to do is to be able to have someone that can speak the language of the community and say, look, there's a problem here. It needs to be fixed. And hopefully with having that the opportunity to be at that table, we should be in a position to correct that. As a public advocate, I would definitely do that, opposed to taking these routes. And I hear you talk about these deform groups or reform groups and defund and all this other stuff that's going on. We have a serious problem right now in our streets. People are getting shot and killed. And we cannot be put in a position to have individuals with special interests dictating the process of how we got to move our communities forward. We have to have a working relationship with an agency that's not going anywhere. And with that being said, no matter what we say as legislators or advocates or city council people, at the end of the day, we have to be able to work with these folks to get New York where it has to go. And we have to hold them accountable. And that's what I would do as public advocate.
Okay, thank you. And I believe we have Jumani Williams. Jumani, welcome. If you could please give a brief 2-minute introduction about why you're seeking re-election and a little bit about your platform going forward.
Peace and blessings, love and light to everyone. Thank you for having this forum, shedding some light to a race that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. And I apologize for my tardiness. I know my folks let folks know I would be a little late, but thank you for being accommodating. As was mentioned, my name is Jumani Williams. I'm the current public advocate. I was elected in the special election and the general about 2 years ago. We tried to hit the ground running. Sister Tish James was nice enough to hire to take about 90% of the staff that she had here. So we had to spend some time hiring up. But once we did that, we did hit the ground running, and then we got hit by a global pandemic. And so we spent a lot of time trying to help navigate the policies around the city and push our legislators and power brokers to do the right thing. We've done a lot of good work. I'm very proud of that work. We've written several reports that are now being turned into policy and law. We've been able to, with our partnership in the city council, I'm proud to have passed more pieces of legislation in our 2 years than any other public advocate in their entirety. And as we reopen, we have to reopen equitably and with justice in mind. And as Mr. Herbert rightly pointed out, we have a rise in gun violence. And those are the two things I think people should be focused on the most. But we have to make sure that people are focused on it with equity in mind, and that we don't make some of the same mistakes we made 30 years ago. That's why it's important to have somebody that can have the conversation, get the things done, but also has the courage to stand up and speak out when it's needed. We have to have a public advocate that's going to push back whoever is mayor, whoever is governor, and whoever's the council to lift the voices of people whose voices sometimes are not heard. We've been doing that for 2 years, about 9 years before that as a council member, and I'd love to get reelected as the public advocate in these critical times.
Okay, thank you, Jumani. I believe Donnell has a question.
Yes, so the first question for tonight was, as the public advocate, how would you approach oversight of the NYPD?
Oh, that's a great question. I've been doing that work as soon as I got into the city council and even before that. I want to answer it a little differently. I think many folks know the work I've done around this issue, so many bills and so many policy changes. But what I've realized now is that there is really no amount of reforms that are going to get us where we want to go. Then that's not to say we don't need transparency and accountability in the police department. We absolutely do. But what we're trying to do now is have a discussion about what public safety is and what law enforcement's role is in it. And so across the country, what you would see is too many people have equated public safety with policing. And so most of the reforms that people think about were actually in Minnesota before George Floyd. And that's why it's important that we now change the conversation so that, of course, we have to push on accountability, transparency, and I'll continue to do that. But what is it that makes a community safe? And are those things funded? Are those things resourced? And then what is law enforcement's role in there? Because they have an absolute role, and we have to make sure that we honor that. But what's been missing is so many of the other agencies that have a role to play. And so that's the big discussion that I think needs to happen as we push and continue to push on accountability and transparency. We want people to be safe. And when you look at communities that you deem safe, they generally have access to safe, affordable housing, generally have access to quality healthcare and mental health, quality schools, food that's not just from the bodega, and jobs. That's not to say that you can't be held accountable for doing something like shooting up a street. There has to be accountability and there has to be consequences there, hopefully rooted in restorative justice and change of behavior. But the communities that don't have those things, what we have tended to do is send police to fix all those things. It's actually unfair to the police officers who don't have all the tools, and certainly unfair to the community. And so that's the direction that I'm hoping we can take this conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'd like to go back to Theo. You were discussing Pat Lynch and the unions as well. If you were elected public advocate, how would you work with community boards to amplify citizen complaints?
So I used to be on the community board, in my community board, and I was actually in the community board where the Dirty 30 came from. So basically, I remember when I joined, they were always talking about how they cleaned up the Dirty 30. And what it took is a lot of work, a lot of calling out the cops, a lot of not being scared by the police. So the community board has an essential role to play in the police reform, because they're at the first line. And so we need to work with all the community board to give them the tool to be able to use 311, to use 911 effectively, to use the commander, the precinct commander that comes to the community board and get and understand how CompStat relate to the community. For example, when I was at the community board, the iPhone just came out. So suddenly there was a rise of felony overnight. The iPhone came out, felony reason, like 20%. And we were wondering what happened. Well, iPhone cost more than $1,000. So when they were stealing iPhones, suddenly it was not a small thing, it became a felony. So all these things needs to be translated over by the community board and the police. So that's the role of, as public advocate, I will work hand in hand with all the community board to make sure the police, both the community and the police has the tool to talk to each other, respectfully, of course.
Okay, great. Donnell, I believe.
Yes, I would just like to remind the candidates that tonight is a forum and not a debate. Please keep that in mind. Next question. How will you address equity access for underprivileged students trying to keep up academically with their classmates following the COVID-19 remote learning process that we saw with major disparities? Mr. Herbert, would you like to begin?
The first thing that has to be addressed, with regards to that, as we talk about inequities, we've had a mayor who had wasted somewhat $700 million, and not one elected official has spoke to that process. And we're talking about, we're supposed to have money available for our kids, particularly in our school system, but we don't have the support base in place to keep them honest and call out this so-called transparency. So the first thing to do is to make sure that the monies that are to be allocated to our school system is there and not being utilized for these guys to patent some type of other programs that, when they get come out of being representatives or out of office, that they don't put themselves in a position to get a job on the very monies that's supposed to be utilized for our young people. That's the biggest problem going forward right now. No one's talking about it. There is the inequity because everybody is not doing what they're supposed to do to monitor the monies that are supposed to be put in place for our education system and a whole sort of other resources. So I would monitor where the money's being placed first and foremost. That's the most important part to attack.
Mr. Williams, the same question.
Thank you very much. I am a public school baby, actually, from preschool to master's, educated in the New York City public school system. So this is something that's very important to me. And I believe everyone should be able to get through the public school system and get a quality education. That's not the case right now. So there's so many, we can have a forum just on how to make the educational system better. I am excited by the new Chancellor, Maisha Ross Porter. I'm excited to see what she's going to bring to the table and hopefully help with the vision of equity. Throughout the pandemic, I invite folks to check out advocate.nyc.gov. We have a report that we talked about how we could reopen the schools and be more equitable. Unfortunately, until recently, a lot of those things were ignored. We spent a lot of time trying to artificially open the doors, and we spent a lot of time even opening them up now when the vast majority of people are still remote. And what we should have done was try to deal with the equity questions then so people can learn remotely equitably and have the resources that they need. And there was so many simple things like a Wi-Fi that so many students didn't have. And so we have to go down the list and see what's preventing our students from learning. and make sure that they have those resources. We also have to make sure that schools simply have things like sports. You'd be surprised of how many schools simply have no sports programs. And now with the funding that we've got from the federal government, this is the first time the government is actually funding the mandated funding to these schools that was supposed to happen 2 decades ago. And so we're finally getting an influx of money. To Tony's point, I do want to make sure that that funding is spent properly, because it's one thing to get the money, it's another thing to spend it properly. So I'm going to be overseeing some of the things that they're spending on. Some of them are really good, like community schools that I'm hoping we can, something that Chancellor Porter started in the Bronx, and we're hoping spreads out so it views the whole child. One thing I want to make sure we focus on is mental health. We're dealing with a lot of trauma that I don't think people are fully grasping, especially what's happened over the past year. There was a 13-year-old in Brooklyn that committed suicide yesterday. And he left a note saying he doesn't blame anybody, and please don't have an assembly for him. Our people are dealing with a lot of pain, and our young people, and these are young people who haven't learned yet the skills to deal with this kind of trauma. Hurt people, and they may hurt themselves, and they may hurt other folks. And so I really want to make sure that we have the quality mental health services that are needed. Lastly, when we talk about defund the police, that phrasing, and I'm not, we can't tell people who are harmed what words they should choose. But what I would say is this: people misconstrued that, and because last year during the pandemic, every other agency was defunded except for the NYPD. And so the Department of Education, the Department of Health, the Division of Youth and Community Development, all lost programs and funding. And so what we're saying is we can't simply send all of the money to the police department. We can't say that we have a hiring freeze for everyone except the police department and then reframe this public safety question. And so that's what we have to do, is make sure that everyone has the funding they need. It's great that people, certain agencies, when they need overtime, they can get it. But what about the other agencies that need it as well? And education is one of those places. And my hope is, out of some of the protests we've seen, we'll understand that the police department is not the only place where these issues are happening. Whether it's the Department of Health, where we see Black maternal health, which at its worst, or at the education system that's not educating people the way they should be. And we also have to look at many of these gifted and talented and other programs that have been pretty discriminatory.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Chino, would you like to address the question?
Oh, yes. I'm a product of the French public system. I grew up in New York until my mother discovered that we had good public system in France, and she sent me to France. So there is a great podcast I would recommend everybody to listen, called White Nice Parent, produced by the New York Times. And in the first episode, I was surprised where they were talking about French-American dual language program. And that's a program I started in 2005 with a group of parents, and I saw suddenly how that program has permutated in the racist program that the Department of Education offer. So it's a very interesting thing of what happened. But one of the problems is segregation. And in the program, they talked about what it takes for school to be desegregated, for white parents to come into the school, and they issue that at 26% of the school. If 26% of white parents were to go into a full Black school, suddenly it would start to see the desegregation and what we have built with that French program. So these are a clue that we need to look at on how to change the system. The second part is we need to look at STEM. STEM is the wrong word. We shouldn't use that STEM. We should use STEAM for science, technology, engineer, art, and math. Because without any art, we don't plan and we don't create the head of the children to start building things. STEM is how to be a robot. STEAM is how to include and build those robots. And there is nothing more important in the public system to build children that will become productive adults, where it will not be a roll of the dice if someone gets out and go to college. It will be because they're all prepared to go to college. So each kid is different. And what is incredible about New York is we have a public system that allows experimentation, like charter school. The charter school, it's a way to experiment. And without it, we wouldn't have been able to create an avant-garde program that becomes sometimes wrong, sometimes very good, and that can be incorporated into school. So that's what I want to do as public advocate, is to figure out how to take all the good experimentation done in charter and bring it back for every children to have access to it. So we need art, and we need, like Jumani says, sport. We need a lot of things done, but we need to look at it from that perspective and stop trying to throw money at it. The second part, last part I will use is paperboy print system. Our school looked like jail. So when our house looked like jail, our school looked like jail. Well, going to jail doesn't look like much different, except it's like a hotel. They bring you the food, they tell you what time to sleep. That is wrong. We need to have NYCHA, mansion for NYCHA, so people will look. And I was in Chicago. I saw the project. They were nice. Some of them were very nice. That's what we should look for. Second part, the school needs to be an environment of learning. The color needs to be bright. They cannot be those dark army color. Everything needs to be for learning and exploration. And that's what I would do as public advocate. Get art out there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chino. I want to segue into Jumani Williams mentioned, people suffering in great pain, and you did as well too. So during this pandemic, this suffering is still continuing, right? And now as the city begins to reopen, New York City workers are being required to return to work, and a lot of them are apprehensive, they're concerned and worried. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and also on the eviction moratorium, which is going to end next month, and what you would do to advocate on behalf of renters who may be facing eviction. So I'll try to keep this in the same order. So we'll go to Tony Herbert first for those two questions.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your first question.
About workers, New York City workers being required to return to work, and a lot of them who are afraid and apprehensive about returning to the physical office. What are your thoughts on that? And just the reopenings in general.
Okay. Well, I mean, there should be some serious concern when we don't have a lot of people that are getting vaccinated because of concerns about the rumors about vaccination and things of that like. So there should be some concerns by the workers. And all kind of measures should be put in place. And I think they should be afforded the opportunity like some of the corporations are doing, where they're still allowing folks to work from home. So I think that opportunity should still be presented. With regards to your second question, what was that again? Because you put
the eviction moratorium ending, and what you would do to advocate on behalf of renters who are either facing eviction or don't know how they're going to pay rent, who are still struggling basically to survive.
Well, see, there's a double-edged sword there, quite frankly. There are folks who received stimulus money and didn't pay their rent, thus putting the landlords, which are small owners, not developers, but small homeowners, who are actually suffering as well. I would support some type of a measure that if in fact that they have fallen on those particular hard times, being one who was homeless and lived in an abandoned building for about 8.5 months, I understand the importance of having a roof over your head, but I also understand the responsibility that comes along with having an apartment and paying somebody's rent. So I would work to make sure or ensure that there's some type of a mechanism in place to assist those who don't have the wherewithal financially, to assist them in some shape or form and fashion, but at the same time to ensure that that landlord doesn't lose their home either.
Okay, thank you. Jumani Williams, if you could please answer those questions as well too. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was doing a good job too. From infection to injection during this pandemic, I believe we had the wrong leaders making decisions, and our communities felt it. Every community has stories about how they were impacted. Unfortunately, the Black and Brown community were disparately impacted and impacted more than anyone else. And you see that, I sometimes feel that we're not learning the lessons that we should have learned. Again, I invite folks to go to advocate.nyc.gov. We put a plan out on how to reopen equitably and how to reopen in a way that deals with the issues that you spoke about. We also pulled out a new deal report of how we can get the city back to where it needs to be. What we have to understand is people need to be safe. They also need to feel safe. And sometimes people are safe but don't feel safe. It can be worse. And so I made it clear that my office would not be going to work back to in person on May 3rd. We're going to take it month by month. And we have to make sure that when they do come back, they come back staggered. We don't need to rush this. There's no need to take risks that we don't need to take. We do have to get back to hopefully not normal, because normal didn't work for a lot of people, but better than normal. We do have to get back some of those folks back into office, and it's going to be difficult. So the more that we can communicate, the more that we can answer questions about what we did, the more that we can talk about how you're going to have childcare when the schools when people aren't back in schools, the better it is for people who are going to come back. We don't want people coming back to work and they're not as productive as they may not be because they're very concerned. And so I do think we're rushing the workers coming back. The governor's definitely troubling to reopen the entire state of May 17th. We may go backwards. And so we have plans and are pushing back on that as we speak. And the second question, I think had to do with evictions. So we were very supportive of eviction moratorium, also foreclosure moratorium. As was pointed out, I think alluding to, there are people on the other side of those things. And a lot of them are small homeowners, are homeowners that actually, quite frankly, have a lot more in common with some of these tenants. So what we are hoping is that there's a reset where everybody pauses for a second, and where no one can get foreclosed on and no one can get evicted. And so far, so good, but the time is coming up, and we want to make sure that tenants as well as homeowners get the services and the resources they need. Yes, there are people that are going to take advantage of a program, but that goes both ways. There has never been a program where owners or tenants didn't take advantage of it. So what we need to do is kind of try best to minimize that while providing the best services that we can. Also remembering part of the problem is some people work off the books, and some of the issues trying to prove that they were harmed can get difficult. So those are some of the things that we have to work out while providing services and resources.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Theochino, if you could answer those two questions as well about city workers returning to work and also renters who may be facing evictions.
So the city worker, that's the mayor's prerogative. I'm running for public advocate, not for mayor. So that question, I'll pass it on to the mayor's candidate. But I feel their pain. I mean, I do feel, and depending what their background is the vaccination. The vaccination works, the number are there. And unfortunately, the communication coming out of the media seems to overstate or understate by a billion the effectiveness of the vaccine. But the problem is there is the historical context of the United States. The United States has been notorious of conducting experiments to Black and brown. So when you were learning about the Tuskegee Airmen, the Tuskegee experiment, as a kid, we're like, oh no, the government doesn't do that. Yeah, the government did that. The government lied to us. So how do we get to the point of the communication part where the Black and brown people feel safe taking the vaccine that works? So now the public advocacy is a share of COPIC. COPIC is the Commission of Information and of Public Information and Management. That's the information of the city. How can we use that information to bring trust in government, to bring trust in transparency? And that's something where the public advocate can play a role, is in the communication of the public data out there. When they tell you 6 people die of the vaccine after 1 million shots, well, that is, the number are there to favor us, to favor the vaccination. The second part about the moratorium, we need to take it month by month for the moment, because we don't know yet when we're going to start having the job back. We need to figure out how to do on an individual case, which landlord are the ones who are being affected by the renter not paying, because there is a big difference between mom and pop landlord with big Donald Trump landlord. So we need to make sure that everybody's taken care of one by one. And so as public advocate, again, I am a computer engineer. We are going to use technology and the 311 system to make sure landlord and tenant who are being affected by not receiving the program will have an ear and an advocate that will work to get them the solution they need. And I will stop there.
Thank you. The next question is going to be a two-part question. First part for Mr. Chino, Mr. Herbert. If elected, what do you hope to bring to the office of public advocate? Mr. Chino?
If I get elected, I hope to bring truth, to bring transparency, to end the corruption of the powerful people in New York who are taking advantage through the hedge fund money, who are being corrupted by the nonprofit such as Riceboro or UHAB, who are making life miserable of many New Yorkers. So what I will bring is an ear, and I will be a loud voice for every New Yorker against every power person in New York City. I do not own anything to anybody. I'm here only because of one person, Paperboy Prince, who put me on the ballot using Rep My Block. Anyone else, I don't owe them anything. They have put so many hurdles that I don't owe anybody anything. So I'm pure.
Mr. Herbert, same question.
Thank you. Well, the one thing I do look forward to bringing to the table, and we always hear this with regards to folks talking about our young people and what they don't have and what we should be doing for them. I'm creating an opportunity for them to have a seat at the table. I will be formulating the first ever citywide youth council that's mirrored directly to that of the city council that affords them an opportunity to meet on a monthly basis, have conversations, and recall, or should I say call in a number of these elected officials and other folks, for various agencies to come and testify before them so that they can ask them the questions with regards to what is being put in place to assist them in every shape, form, or fashion. The other thing I look forward to bringing to the table is as actually advocating to bring back vocational training in our public school system. I'm a graduate of Westinghouse High School. And at the end of the day, we've learned so many different trades. We don't have that in the school system anymore. So affording our young people that opportunity, which hopefully will allow them to grow and be put in a position to actually come out of that school with a trade and open up their own business so that they can actually qualify to bid for some of these government contracts that's offered by the city, which a number of our elected officials have not created an opportunity for. I would do that. I would make sure that that's in place. But couple that with the fact that I would bring a real sense, and I don't want to say that I'm the people's voice. I think that's sending the wrong message. What I want to say is I want to amplify the people's voice. They have a voice. They just need to know that it needs to be amplified so people can hear what's going on. A lot of people in our city are being left behind because no one is reaching back. Those that have been elected have not reached back to say, hey, look, I'm doing my job and this is what I'm going to do for you. They're too busy cutting deals to lock themselves in for a future career. That's not what this is all about. It's about serving the people, and that's what I would do. Absent of all the craziness and all the politics, I'm not trying to be the public advocate to hear my name at the luncheons or anything along that vein. I'm trying to be public advocate so that I can amplify the voices of the people in our community and they can be heard, and the resources that our taxes pay for are delivered and delivered responsibly and without corruption.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, as the incumbent, if reelected, what, if anything, would you like to add to the office?
Thank you for that question. First, I just want to make sure folks understand what the public advocate is mandated to do. There are 5 charter mandated powers. One is legislation. You get to introduce legislation into the city council. You don't have a vote, but you can work with the council to get things passed. As an ombudsman, you're a go-between between the people and the city government. 3, you're a charter cop. So you're supposed to make sure that the agencies are doing their charter mandated duties. The 4th is you have a vote on the pension board. And the 5th is you get to appoint people to commissions and committees like the CCRB and the City Planning Commission. And the 6th one is not charter mandated, but I call it the bully pulpit, being able to use your voice in your office to raise issues that may not be raised. We've done that for the past 2 years and want to continue doing that. And I think it's more important than ever as we try to come out of this stronger, that there's someone able to do that on a whole host of issues. We did keep our word in saying that we were going to reimagine the office. And, our sister Tish James was very focused on litigation. As a community organizer by training, I said I wanted to change what the office focused on. And we have a very robust community engagement unit with borough advocates, community organizers, and deputy public advocates on different issue areas like education, like housing, and public safety. And so we want to continue working on those. We did get one thing which we wanted, and people might be surprised. Our budget is fairly small, about $4.5 million. It may sound like a lot, but in comparison, The Brooklyn Borough President Office is over $6 million. And so we have more to do in citywide with less money. So we'd like to see an increase. We were glad that we were able to get a charter change so that the public advocate's budget is no longer to the whim of, say, the mayor. We have seen public advocates' budget cut before. Michael Bloomberg cut Betsy Combaug's budget because he was mad at her. That can't happen the same way again. The one thing we'd like to see strengthened with the office is subpoena power. We have the ability to subpoena, to get information from agencies, but we'd either have to go to court or go to the city council, which makes it very difficult. If we can get subpoena power, it would strengthen the office and the work that we're doing.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to remind the audience that we would love to take questions from you as well. So either in the Zoom chat or the FB Live, if you have anything, feel free to post in there and we'll get to it. And I wanted to ask one more question from each of the candidates about how they would redefine this role for Black and Brown communities who are worried about both violence happening on the streets of the city and also violence from police. They're worried about getting pulled over for having an air freshener, and they're worried about hate crimes on the rise. So how would you redefine this role specifically for Black and Brown communities who are facing the brunt of this sort of stuff? We'll start again with Tony Herbert and then go down the line.
Well, I don't think it needs to be redefined. I think what needs to be done is people do their job as they swore to their oath. Public advocate is the person who is out there to ensure that the agencies are doing their job. And if they're not doing their job, then we remove those people who aren't. That's just what it is. When we get in here and try to be creative and create atmospheres that there is something wrong that should be fixed, what we need to do first and foremost is make sure we have the right leadership in place. That's where the problem is. If we have a commissioner that's not doing his job, who's taking orders from the mayor and not hearing anything from the city council and backing up that individual in this particular seat, there's a problem. So there is a failure in leadership that's causing the problem. So I don't know about redefining. I think we need to make people do their job to ensure that folks on the street are treated civilly with respect and that the job is being done according to the charter.
Okay, thank you. Theo Chino?
This is again an intake problem. To figure out how to get there is a problem is we need to keep track of the problem, and we need a way for those problems to be accounted for. So as an office, and that will be part of what I will do as public advocate, is really to use the 311 as the complaint line where people can say, I got pulled over by the cop. I feel that he pulled a gun on me. I feel that was too much. He didn't give me his business card. So we have the domain. Basically, we need to use, for example, the Domain Awareness Center against the police when the police step out of their bound. I mean, all those cameras around New York, is it true that someone pulled the gun? We can figure it out. But we need to have an intake system. And I, as public advocate, will put that intake system to make sure someone can call 311, put the complaint, and we'll investigate. And just to finish very quickly, Jumani's right. The office needs more power. It's a budget that is not at the whim of the city council or the mayor, and that needs a charter change. And the second part is the subpoena power part that is needed. So as public advocate, I will use Rep My Block to get 40,000 signatures from City of New York citizen to put those two things on a referendum so we can have them voted by the people of New York. And then we will have a real public advocate. Whether I'm elected or not, I will do that. So Jumani, if you get reelected, I want to work with you to get the referendum beside the mayor or the city council. Herbert, same thing.
Okay, great. Look, we got unity already. I love it. And Jumani, I know you've worked, extensively on this issue, helping to ensure that New Yorkers can film police if there's any misconduct going on. So if you were reelected, what would you do in addition to that to help advocate more for Black and Brown communities in this respect?
And to Theo's point, thank you for that. And for clarity, we did get the charter change for the budget, so it's no longer at the whim. We just definitely need a lot more money, and we still need the subpoena power. So I look forward to, if I get reelected, getting that help. So I appreciate it. That question is actually the $1 million question, and I would love to spend another hour just talking about that, because these communities, quite frankly, they're in the middle and they're sandwiched, and we have to be honest about it. They're sandwiched between very real street violence that is going up. By the way, it's not just in New York City. it's all across the nation. And I have to remind folks, the policies we put forth prior to the pandemic and the programs that we got funded, we were at historic lows of gun violence and murders. We were almost at unsustainable lows. We were so low in the city. Now, any one murder has a name to it, so I don't want to downplay the numbers, but we were in the right direction. The pandemic hit and everything changed. But these communities are often sandwiched between the street violence, the gun violence, and over policing and police violence. And if they dare to question the over policing police violence, then they'll get the flip of that and they'll get under policing, which we don't want either. And so you have to have someone in there to have the conversation that, look, all we want is the same services that other communities get. The problem, as I mentioned before, is that if police could solve this problem, they would have solved it already. There have been shootings that happened with police right there. Thankfully, they were there. They were able to intervene, make arrests, and maybe prevent other folks from getting shot, but they weren't able to prevent the shooting to begin with. And so there are two things with gun violence. There's a supply and demand. The supply is the federal government that's doing a terrible job. It's not about illegal guns. It's actually about the legal guns that people can get in other states that make their way here. But the demand of violence, the penchant for violence, what's causing the violence is where we have to really attack. And that takes all of our partners. That includes the police department. But what's been missing is the funding for so many of the other departments. The number one way to cut violent crime arrests in half by all data is a job. Last year, while we were increasing the NYPD, we cut all summer youth jobs in half. And so that messaging doesn't really bode well for what we know works to keep violence down. And so we have to have someone that's going to be able to withstand the political winds and look straight ahead and say all communities deserve to be safe. And we have to redefine what public safety is. I want to be clear that I stand there because so many of the other reforms that have been tried in other police departments, including this one, just didn't work because of how we're using law enforcement. And many of these police officers, when you speak to them, they don't want to be doing all the jobs that people are sending them to do. They don't want to be the first persons going to someone who's in a mental health crisis. So it's unfair all the way around, but we have to have the political power, the political will to get it done. We have to have a mayor that believes in it. We have to have a police commissioner that believes in it. You look at someplace like Newark, New Jersey, although they had a shooting, police involved shooting this year and a small increase in gun violence, it's much less than everywhere else. Last year, they didn't have one officer fire a weapon and they had no increases in gun violence. And so we need to look at, and by the way, they took what we were doing here and actually took it over there. So we need to have the discussion that's honest, that includes law enforcement, but doesn't only include law enforcement because that hasn't worked. As a matter of fact, many of our leaders are apologizing 30 years later for what they did 30 years ago because it didn't directly and immediately deal with the violence and it wreaked havoc on our community.
Okay, thank you. We're running close to time. Are you guys okay staying just a few minutes over?
I have at 8 o'clock.
You have 8 o'clock? Okay, so we'll just go to closing statements and then one we'll throw in, we have a few audience questions. So if you could just answer this one in your closing statements about how you would work with a new mayor to tackle many of the ongoing problems, especially during a pandemic, and then just your closing thoughts. Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, it's very important that we have cohesiveness amongst our legislative bodies, not only on the city level, but also on the state level. The problem is we have a lot of folks who just can't get out of their way. Everybody wants to be important. They want to be power brokers, and they forget the very oath that they've taken. So it would be my position as public advocate to definitely attempt to work very closely with whoever the mayor is, but also to make sure that they understand, he or she, whoever it might be, that you have a job to do, and that job cannot be subjugated to, to conversations, which is like what a lot of politicians like to do. They like to give you that long drawn out speech to give you the impression that they're talking intelligently about the issue when it's just cut and dry. The bottom line is you have a job to do and it has to get done. And people in our society, our voters, the folks that live in our communities want answers to the problems that's living here. We should not be walking down the street where a 1-year-old gets shot or turn around and not have an answer for it. And then we sit here and talk about we're going to apologize 30 years later. That's a problem. It's happening now. And just to correct the numbers, the violence in our community started in January of 2020, just before the pandemic. The numbers started rising then. It just got worse during the pandemic. And we saw that the rate of gun violence, and I'm telling you that because I'm on these streets and I hear what people are saying. We have mothers afraid to sit out in their own courtyards because they're afraid the bullets are going to fly. And that's not only happening in Brownsville, that's happening on the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side, and Times Square. So we need somebody that's going to work closely with the mayor and have them understand that your ears to the ground, that you are out here in this community, you are out in these streets, not hidden behind some wall protected by major security, that you are out here willing to make things happen to ensure their safety. And that's what we need, a public advocate that's about transparency, that's about bringing about transparency and holding everybody to accountability, because most folks tend to think that, oh, if I go cut this deal, we're going to be able to walk away from this and not get anything.
Your time is up.
We can't have that.
Okay, thank you. Same question for Theo Chino. How would you work with the new mayor to tackle a lot of the problems that are going on now, especially in the midst of a pandemic, and just your closing thoughts tonight?
So I will answer this. I was thinking how to use this public advocate office, and I said I would hire Jumani. But now I will also make the job offer to Anthony, except that I need to be the boss to change the dynamic of how we go. Because Jumani and I are both DSA members. We're both socialists. The difference is Jumani is discovering socialism. I am a 17-year-old French socialist. So I have the experience of being an activist within the socialist movement that is as old as the Democratic and the Republican movement. And so to make that change of paradigm, I want to have the best person with me. So then Jumani can go out and be the best governor New York State can have, because that's what we need. But the thing is, I want to have the job to be the boss, so I can say, this is how we're going to work, Anthony and Jumani. This is what we're going to do to keep everybody accountable. Because Tony and Jumani are right, but we need someone who is not afraid to take on the Democratic and the Republican machine in New York City. And that's going to get worse next year. So I'm going to work tirelessly to get more than 17,000 activists in the Democratic and in the Republican Party to change the paradigm. So we don't have only lawyers that weaponize the Board of Election, but we have everyday people who can use 32 hours of their time a year, 32 hours every year, to give and decide who should be the leader of the Democratic and the Republican Party, because that's where the whole problem of corruption and politicians is in New York City. Okay. So that's what I will do. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jumani, if you could please quickly answer that as well, too, how you would work with the new mayor to tackle a lot of the problems that he or she will be inheriting, and also just your closing thoughts for tonight.
Thank you. I want to thank the Sisters Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Sorority and the Brothers of Psi Phi of Omega Psi Phi and the League of Women Voters for putting this together, and the people who are watching today. As I mentioned, not much attention is being paid to this race, so thank you for bringing that up. You know, it is important to recognize that my job is not necessarily to work with or against any mayor. My job is to raise the voices of the people of the city of New York and get policies, resources to and for them. And we've been successful in doing it. And so I always want to make it clear, I don't start off with any position one way or the other. I just present what I think the people of the city of New York need. And I want to be clear that it's not just enough to be able to speak, you have to get results. And so even in my height of, I think when a lot of folks started hearing the work we were doing around abuses of stop, question, frisk with Michael Bloomberg, we were able to get almost $500,000 from that same mayor to start the work on getting the first ever youth center in my council district. And I got to shout out Council Member Lewis, who's going to be completing that project. Even in my battles with the mayor of the city of New York now, we just got an additional $5.5 million to pilot a program called Advanced Peace that we think will help with the gun violence, same kind of model that helped create the cure violence and crisis management system. And so you have to be able to work with folks and hold them accountable at the same time. It's very difficult to do in the way things are right now, but I believe we've put a model forward of how to do that. And we want to continue doing that with whomever the next mayor is. And I'd love to have all of your support and your votes on June 22nd to continue to do good work as New York City shows that it's New York strong, and we come out of this stronger than we were. Thank you so much, everyone. Peace and blessings. Love and light to you all.
Thank you so much, Jamani Williams, Theo Chino, and Tony Herbert. On behalf of Donnell and I, thank you as the moderators, and I will turn it back over to Kimberly now.
I want to thank our moderators for doing such a great job this evening, and want to let all of our guests know that if you are interested in seeing this video, it is available on the New York Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta's Facebook page, where you will be able to see this video. And now I'm going to send it to Harry Watson to close us out.
Thank you, Kimberly. Once again, I would like to extend hearty thanks to the candidates, the incumbent, Mr. Jamani Williams, Mr. Anthony Tony Herbert, and Mr. Theo Chino. Thank you for your spirited conversation and thoughts on the upcoming race, on the, excuse me, not upcoming, but the current race. We appreciate the efforts that each of you have displayed this evening. And I'd like to thank also the women of the League of Women Voters, excuse me, and our partners, the lovely ladies of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated of New York Alumni Chapter, and the Brothers of Xi Phi for bringing this this event together tonight. It's a very important conversation that we have had, and as we continue to move forward towards the election, I would like to wish each of you luck in your endeavor, and I hope that each of you are able to, whomever takes the cake, to pull off the things that you need to do for this city so that we can move forward expeditiously and united. And on that note, we'd like to say good night and thank all of our guests for joining us this evening. Thank you. We will see you on the next event.